A God who is too big to fail, even if everything else fails. So we're going to answer the question that Paul gives us today, and that is, just how big is God? Well, let me just tell you this. Our God is so big that his faithfulness will never fail you. God's faithfulness will never fail you. Now, this section begins with a question that leads into a series of other questions. We're going to pick up in verse 31. Here's the question Paul asked. What then shall we say in response to these things? Now, question is, so what are these things that Paul is talking about? Well, what he's talking about is what we've been talking about for the last several weeks. Every human being on earth is a sinner. We were all born in sin. We were all born with a rebellious heart against God, and all sin is under the wrath of God. But God, because of his love for us, sends his son Jesus Christ to die for us. He brings him back from the dead so that he might bring us into a permanent relationship with him, even though we did not deserve it. You say, well, why did he do that? It's all because of this one word we keep coming back to. It's the word grace. So Paul's question in effect is, now what should we say about that? In light of everything God has done to bring us into his family, to bring us into his heart, to bring us into his presence, what should we say about that? And what he's going to do is, he's going to show us just all that this proves about this God of grace. So he goes on to ask this question. Great question, by the way. Listen to this. If God is for us, who could be against us? Well, just let that sink in. If God is for us, who could possibly be against us? By the way, grammatically in the Greek language, that's really not a very good translation. Grammatically, the question is assumed. It's kind of a rhetorical question. The word if really should be translated since or because. Since God is for us, because God is for us, who could be against us? This is not a hypothesis. It's not a theory. It is a fact. God is for us. God is for me. God is for you. As a matter of fact, turn to your neighbor right now. I want you to do this. Turn to your neighbor right now, and I want you to point. I know it's rude to point, but this time I want you to point. Point to them and say this. God is for you. All right? Do it again. God is for you. Now let that sink in. Just let that sink in. If God is for you, that doesn't just mean game on. That means game over. That word for literally means in our behalf. In other words, what Paul is saying is God is working for us. Now, I bet you've never heard a pastor say this, but I want you to think about this. In a real sense, God's on our side. God proved he was on our side when he sent Jesus. God proved he was on our side when he offered his grace. God proves he's on our side when he offers us his forgiveness. God is on our side. Now, I know it's a trite saying, but it's true. If it's just you and God, you're in the majority. You've heard it said many times, God plus one is a majority. Now again, this is actually a rhetorical question where you get the same answer no matter how you ask the question. For example, let's say you said, okay, well, if God is for me, who in reality can be against me? What is the answer? Nobody. If God is for us, what can be against us? What's the answer? Nothing. If God is for us, when can something be against us? The answer is never. If God is for us, where can anything be against us? And the answer is nowhere. Now, if you're a believer like I am, if you're a follower of Christ, you may be sitting there thinking right now, sorry, but I know a lot of things are against me. The world's against me. Sin is against me. Temptation's against me. Satan is against me. Culture is against me. Society is against me. And what Paul is simply wanting you to understand is this. That all may be true, and it probably is true. In fact, I'll say it is true. But what Paul is saying is, when God is for you, it doesn't matter who's against you. It doesn't matter how many are against you. However, that could raise this question. Well, how do I know that this God is for me? Paul says, okay, here's the proof. Listen to this. Verse 32. He who did not spare his own son, obviously talking about Jesus, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also, along with him, graciously give us all things? Now, what Paul is obviously doing, he's arguing from the greater to the lesser. What is the greatest need? We've already established this in the first 7 chapters of Romans. What is the greatest need every sinner on earth has? We need a Savior and we need salvation. Those are our 2 greatest needs. We need a Savior and we need salvation. Well, guess what? God provided both when he gave his own son Jesus to die for every sinner and to offer every sinner salvation. So here's the point Paul is making. Okay, so if God has already met the greatest need we will ever have, then here's the question. Will he not meet any other need that you have?